We're Clemens, and we are math teachers, and we're here to talk to you about station teaching. We incorporated it this past year and saw some great gains, so we want to help you be able to do this in your own classroom. We adapted this model from the Math Daily 3, that is math by myself or whatever by myself, an independent station, and then math with someone, with a partner. That's what we call partner math. And then there was a math writing that we weren't necessarily sure about, so we adapted that to the math lab. So that's where they make products or our project-based learning essentially. And then the final one part of that incorporates the teacher is what we call math workshop. So that's when we pull kids to us. And so Amber's going to talk to us a little bit about math workshop.
Okay, so Math Workshop is the station where the teacher is based, and it's therefore important for all the other students to understand that when the teacher is in Math Workshop, that time cannot be interrupted. So Math Workshop is where all of the new skills and concepts are taught, and there are several ways that we do that. We do that through activities, demonstrations, models. We also bring in the interactive notebook. As far as the math classroom goes, the Math Workshop is also a great place to introduce important skills that students will need to use the calculator for. The biggest advantage that we saw in Math Workshop was that instead of having a class of 25, you only had 6 or 7 students around you, so lots better discussion took place, and you were able to keep a better eye on each student as far as how they were progressing through learning new material. And that's Math Workshop, and now I'll hand it back to Megan to talk to you about Me, Myself, and Math.
So Me, Myself, and Math is the independent part of the station rotation that we have going on here. And so in this one, we had short videos that kind of extended from Math Workshop. So kind of a few more examples for those kids that really needed that. And some of the kids that like to have it just straight up, just give me some examples, let me work on it. So that's kind of sort of where what Math Workshop did. So it had a video, and then you had some practice problems that went with that. We try to keep those pretty short and sweet because it is kind of sort of overwhelming and it looks like a lot of work. So when you put 20 questions in front of a kid right here, it gets a little bit overwhelming. So we try to keep those short and sweet, and so that's what we did at Me, Myself, and Math. We also use Edpuzzle to be able to monitor which students and watched or had not watched lessons, so we could call them out and say, hey, look, why haven't you watched this lesson, and that kind of thing, so that we could kind of make sure that they are keeping up with that, because that was an important role for our stations in Math Workshop to work, was that they had to be able to get some extra examples in there, because we're condensed Math Workshop so much, about 15 minutes, whereas before whole group, you were teaching 30 minutes, so you had to have a little bit more time for those extra examples. All right, so then next we have math, partner math.
Okay, so in partner in math station, and remember that in Math Workshop and in Me, Myself, and Math, those are new skills. So those two stations sort of support each other. Partner in math is completely based on review. The way that we used partner in math in our classrooms was students would have a few spiral review questions that they could answer, obviously with a partner, and then there would also be some type of review game or review activity that you could complete with a partner. And then I usually would have something that the students filled out as a result of that game or activity, just so that I could sort of have a way to make sure they were doing that and to sort of check their progress on that. And most of those games and activities we either make up on our own or we get from Pinterest or find online, and then we would produce those and package them in a way that students could grab them from a supply table, take them back to their seat, and then do the game or activity and then put that back. So once those activities were created, we won't have to do that step again, and those are there and ready to go again for next year. And so that's partner in math, all about review.
All right, and so now I'm going to talk to you about the math lab that we kind of created for math writing, so that kind of want this to make this fit for you. So this is kind of the floater station that we thought kind of sort of went together. Math lab also talks about previous skills, and so our previous units just to kind of reinforce that. And so this is where they can produce something that just maybe a little extra, trying to find a little extra to add on to the previous unit. I felt like we had some good discussion from Math Lab, that light bulb kind of sort of came on for those students that didn't understand it the previous unit, so that was very encouraging. This one also was a little bit more difficult. I taught Algebra 1 to do with Algebra 1 because to find a product to do that. And so this is something that you could use almost like challenge questions for. So you can, put 5 or 6 really hard questions that maybe make the student do a little bit more or apply a couple of extra steps to do that, and really challenge those students, especially if you have advanced students doing the Algebra 1 or whatever you want to make that fit. So this is kind of a little bit floater. So if you want to change that and make that math writing, math workshop, challenge questions, critical thinking, whatever, puzzles, something like that those kids also might enjoy.
Okay, so those are our 4 stations. And now we're going to talk a little bit about different ways that you can use the stations in your classroom. And it might be that for one class you incorporate the stations in one way, and then you find that for another class a different strategy works better. The first strategy for incorporating stations is probably the most obvious one, where you designate a certain amount of time that students spend in the station, and then they physically rotate from one station to the next. So for example, if you have a typical 50-minute class period, you might do 15 or so minutes in each station. That gives you time to come and get class started, and then go to your stations, and then everyone does 2 stations, and then that still gives you time to wrap up class with an exit ticket or a discussion, or however it is that you tend to close out class. And so then if you have 4 stations, it would essentially take 2 class days for every student to go through every station. So in that first strategy, students are physically moving from one station to the next. The only disadvantage that I found with that, and really the reason we explored other ways of doing stations, was in Partner in Math, especially if they were doing an activity that had like matching cards or had pieces, and they were partway through it and then it was time to rotate, they were having to put all those pieces up instead of seeing that activity through. So that was one reason we looked at doing the stations differently, or giving the kids some options. But that's the most obvious and basic way, is to have a literal rotation where students are moving from one station to the next.
And also, what we also liked about that is that kids are changing. You're asking kids to do something for 15 minutes, math for 15 minutes. And so a lot of students see that as reachable. I can do this for 15 minutes. I'm asking you, and so I do like that, especially, Star Review, we went back to doing that, actually physically rotating through, because it is kind of sort of mundane and gets a little bit boring. So we went actually back to, rotating, and we're saying, look, I want you to focus on something for 15 minutes. So the other way that we explored, and probably did for majority of the year last year, was we allowed the students to choose what they wanted to work on when they were away from math workshop. So we still designated times for them to come to us. So it might be, we might have the blue group with us at the very beginning, and so blue is with us while everybody else is out there doing some other stuff. Whether it be math workshop, whether it be me, myself, and math, so their videos and practice, or their math lab project, or their partner in math. That's kind of we kind of left that up to them, and so they could find someone that they wanted to do math lab with, or math workshop, or partner in math, in that, and so they could kind of pick and choose. I felt like students liked that a little bit better. Another thing that you kind of had to watch out for was that it was hard to monitor. So before, when they were rotating through, we could tell if they were working on what they should be working on, and if they weren't, then I could say, hey, let's get back to what we're supposed to be doing. And then but it was hard to tell. So that was another way that we kind of that we did probably the majority of the year. So,
and then there's another way to extend that strategy that tends to work really well with advanced students, and that is to even make the math workshop somewhat optional. So you could post in your classroom when you'll be hosting a math workshop and what content you'll be discussing during that math workshop, and then students basically sign up for a time that they'll attend math workshop. Advanced kids like that because oftentimes they can master the material just through the use of the video lesson, and then they end up doing some digging online themselves, and they're able to master the skill without attending math workshop at all. So for students who are independent like that, then that tends to work really well, because now they're responsible for deciding, hey, I think I might need some extra help on that skill, so I'm going to go to math workshop for that. So that it makes that station also somewhat optional. You have to stay on top of how well those students are doing on practice problems and quizzes to make sure that they truly are doing okay without the benefit of the math workshop. But that's 3 ways that you can incorporate the stations into your classroom. We at some point have used all of those. It really just depends on the class. And like I said, you might have one class that does it one way and one class that does it another. You'll kind of see that when you get into the rhythm of the stations.
And so we really hope that this video helps you find some ways and some strategies to help you incorporate stations into your classroom. We saw huge benefits from it. It's it's something that we definitely teach by now, and it's hard to go out of. I don't know that we could ever not do stations, and incorporating that with our students. Just a big part of that is just building relationships and knowing those kids really well, and knowing that they know it, and that was a huge thing that we thought benefited our students as and their successes. So,
okay, thanks for coming to Transform Ed.